All right, good evening, everyone. It's Monday, October 26, 2020, 6 p.m. And call the meeting to order, and we do have a quorum. As authorized by Section 551.071 of the Texas Government Code, this meeting may be convened into closed executive session for the purpose of seeking confidential legal advice from the city attorney on any agenda item herein. The City of Rowlett reserves the right to reconvene, recess, or realign the regular session or called executive session or order of business at any time prior to adjournment. Due to the public health emergency and to conform with social distancing requirements, the city council meetings will be held via teleconferencing. The public can view live on the city's website or via RTN 16. You can listen to the meeting live by calling 888-550-3932 and enter meeting number 161-240-7714. To provide public comment on any agenda item, please send an email to citizeninput@rowlett.com by 3:30 the day of the meeting. And there'll be no comments taken during this meeting. And Laura has informed me we did not get any public comments. So we'll move right to item 2, which is discuss status of Dallas County and Texas Division of Emergency Management, TDEM, Coronavirus Relief Fund, CRF, allocations and other coronavirus aid, relief, and economic security CARES Act, and take action on the final use of CRF allocations. So good evening, everyone. And I don't know if Ed's starting right away or Brian, you're starting us off.
Mayor, I'm going to kick us off and then I'll turn it over to staff. But so council, tonight we're going to revisit our allocation strategy regarding the funds we received from the CARES Act. As you know, the city has had numerous conversations this summer about how to allocate those dollars for businesses, individuals, and other COVID-related expenses. In September, new guidance from the U.S. Treasury provides the city with an opportunity to modify its allocation strategy and provide additional time for the city to help our community without artificial deadlines from other agencies. I will turn it over to staff to lead the discussion, but that just sets the groundwork of what we're trying to do tonight. So, Ed, I assume that's you.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Mayor and Council, once again for letting me take part of your night for discussions on CARES Act funding. I promise to be quick. Like Brian mentioned, I'll touch on our multiple sources of CARES Act funding, but the primary focus tonight will be on the Dallas County CRF allocation. Do not see the slides up yet. So I'll start just by touching base on up-to-date allocation decisions made by council. Currently, we have 33% of the $3.25 million from Dallas County set aside from business assistance, 17% for individual household assistance, 25% to cover city response costs, 22% for reserve to provide some flexibility for what council chooses, and 3% for food pantry assistance. And that's our current allocation. And can we go to the next slide? I'll provide status updates on each of those. So you recall the chamber has been chosen by the city to manage the robust program, both the round 1, round 2, and round 3 applications. They are still in the process of working through that. As of right now, 19 applicants received an award through the first round, 54 through the second round, with 2 still pending review. And for round 3, we had a total of 19 currently that we're still anticipating providing funding to. Right now, that program at its current status, we anticipate roughly $250,000 cost underrun from that 33% allocation, or that 1.1 million. Next slide. Second is the Individual Household Assistance Program. This update is what I received this morning from Catholic Charities. As of last Friday, roughly 16,000 in direct funding has been provided to our residents, and that will also include another $1,600 in administrative management fees to Catholic Charities. At this rate, we anticipate roughly $500,000, both combination of the direct funding allocation and the management fee allocation, to remain by the end of the performance period for the Dallas County CRF allocation. Next slide, please.
Ed, can you back up one slide? When it says applications undecided 21, that to me is indicating there's 32 approved or still in approval, still being reviewed. Do you agree with that? Well, I don't know. I don't understand because it says 30 reviewed and then it says applications undecided 21.
So those are applications that are in the process of the final review, but require additional documentation.
Okay. So all but 3 have had their initial round of review. 11 have been approved of those 33 of those, yeah. And then 21, we've asked for more information.
Correct.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Before, it did not include a slide on the food pantry assistance. I did address that in the staff report. We're still working through that assistance for both Life Message and Hope in Hand. We do have additional CDBG allocations for Life Message that we're working through that process before we discuss providing any of the Dallas County CRF allocation to them. And I'm currently working on a project with Hope in Hand to determine eligibility. With the city's response, we'll cover that on a subsequent slide. So as council is aware, we've struggled this year with really understanding the CARES Act funding, whether it's CRF, CDBG, or any of the other funding sources. Not a lot of guidance has been provided to staff, and we've worked through this in a very conservative approach to ensure that not only do we maximize the dollars that are available to the city to reimburse as costs and provide assistance to the community, but also to ensure that none of those expenses, none of the reimbursements are de-obligated, or that we are asked to return any of that funding, whether it's a year from now or 3 years, 5 years from now, when the OIG for any of these federal departments chooses to conduct an audit, if they choose to do that. So we've always taken a very conservative approach, a very methodical approach, and as the guidance changes, we consider the risks involved in approaching, eligibility for certain claims and reimbursements. So, as of to date, we feel very confident that the eligibility for certain costs, specifically payroll costs for budgeted payroll costs, as a potential reimbursement. That is something that we feel comfortable in submitting, and that is the strategy that we are going to propose tonight. As of right now, the current Treasury guidance states that public safety and public health employees, the costs associated with those employees responding to COVID is eligible, and for administrative ease, they consider all those employees, and they do provide additional guidance detailing what specifically what positions would be eligible. Those budgeted and unbudgeted costs would be eligible for reimbursement. Next slide. To date, we've submitted two expenses to Dallas County for review and approval. One is the initial $100,000 robust allocation that we used from city funds. We've requested reimbursement for that through Dallas County. That has been approved. And we've also submitted a little over $93,000 in personal protective equipment purchases and other supplies to Dallas County. The next slide we'll discuss the initial allocation strategy, but let's go back, Laura. Our future submission strategy. So on the left is what we've currently done, what we submitted, and then subsequent slides for other funding sources will follow the same format. And on the right is our current submission strategy or future submission strategy. Given the new guidance, we're proposing to submit for a little less than $2 million for fire operations personnel, FY20, and that's budgeted expenses. An additional $1.9 million for police patrol shift personnel, and another $355,000 for other personnel expenses. And that includes both budgeted and unbudgeted expenses, which takes us to $4.26 million. The strategy we're taking is to we have enough that we can substantiate based on current guidance to submit more than what's available. And we want to make sure that we have an automatic appeal in place in case there's any challenge. So this is why we're taking the strategy of asking for more than what's available, because we can prove that we have expenses that are eligible given the current amount of funding. Any questions on that?
What's the unbudgeted and other personnel cost?
That would be for finance personnel, time spent on COVID-related matters. So the $355,000 is if we were to not have the public safety payroll clause in the Treasury as an eligible reimbursement strategy. This is something that we have documentation for. Finance, from the very beginning, we've tracked hours spent on COVID, whether or not it's eligible for reimbursement. So the $355,000 is what we feel very strongly that we could substantiate in the absence of any of the public safety payroll provisions.
I think what Matt said was, what's the unbudgeted amount? You said it was budgeted and unbudgeted.
Sorry.
That would be an explanation. We needed that also, so thank you.
That would be overtime.
Okay.
Do we know how much of the 355 is unbudgeted?
Roughly 62,000.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
And we're still working through verifying all the documentation, and so that number is a little bit. It's very close to where we think we're about 95% completed, completing the review process for that dollar value. Next slide, please. So the previous slide showed what we've submitted, and then the remaining amount, which is the 3.05 million. Based on current council authorized allocations, we're looking at 972,000, assuming that we are able to expend all those funds, which at the current rate, we do not anticipate that. This is the total allocation, and that includes the robust round 2 and 3, the individual household assistance program in its entirety, the food pantry assistance program, respiratory protection equipment purchases, and contract costs with CDR McGuire, who serves as our disaster consultant. Which the total there is 1.8 million in dedicated allocations to date, based on discussions that we've had with City Council to date. With that leaves a little over 1.25 million available for future city response and other City Council authorized expenses.
And council, even if we go down this route, so with additional resources, and we change the allocation to what we're suggesting tonight with public safety, we still don't know if there's going to be a second round or a third round of this COVID, a surge, I should say. There could be some, we know that the number of cases have increased, and for example, in Dallas County, you're seeing it pretty much all over the country. And it could even be worse than what it was earlier this summer. So, what we feel like this change in allocation does, it provides us more time to make sure that we can disperse the robust program funds as well as the individual assistance. Otherwise, if we can't, we're going to end up de-obligating those funds and returning those back to the federal government. So this way, it puts the decisions clearly in our hands without artificial deadlines or accelerated deadlines, I should say, from other agencies if we do this. And so we wouldn't recommend tonight, on how to allocate how to spend any additional dollars at this point. We think that needs time to mature through this process, maybe even till after the first of the year. But for right now, if we do what we're talking about, we still would have the money to be able to do these programs. Only now we will be in charge of the deadlines and the guidance.
And I do want to clarify one thing. The request tonight is not to discuss changes to the allocations, but discuss our approach, our strategy to substantiate the reimbursements, the allocation that we have through Dallas County and some of these other funding sources. And in no way will we stop documenting taking the approach we were taking originally with documenting, getting all the documentation for the robust program, individual assistance program, or any other reimbursement program.
Ed, this may be a subtlety, but I understood that we were going to have to modify our allocation to Dallas County.
So we have a deadline of October 31st. If we choose to make any changes to our current allocations, to submit that for approval through Dallas County. What the request for the public safety payroll cost allows us to do is to ensure that if we have any underruns, that we can capture those costs and ensure that we don't return any funding. So if we choose to make any changes to the robust program, individual assistance program, or any other program, we can do so only until October 31st through Dallas County.
Well, is this the end of your presentation, Ed?
It's not. It is the end of the Dallas County portion of it.
I was just trying to decide whether we pull the presentation down so we can see everybody's faces, or what else are you going to present?
Just our strategy for some of the other funding sources and status updates.
Okay. So do you want us to stop and have this conversation now, or do you want to wait till the end?
We can have that now. I think Brian, we can have that now. I don't think any of the others will necessarily impact it directly.
Okay. Council, so Ed has proposed a strategy here that changes what we've done as far as how we present it to Dallas County. Do we have any questions? I see Matt has his hand up.
Yeah, Ed or Brian, have you guys talked to any other communities? Have any other communities been having trouble giving away money? I mean, was this something that was added because communities were having a hard time of getting those funds out there? Kind of walk me through that piece of it.
Matt, they are. I'm on these Rockwall County calls all the time, and I do remember a month or so ago, several cities indicating that they were going to turn back money into the Rockwall County side. If you remember, we have two pieces of this. There's the Dallas County allocation, which is the biggest piece, the $3.2 million, and then there's another $469,000 that we're getting from the state. Same source, coming from the U.S. Treasury, same source, funneling all the way through us. So the Rockwall County cities got a portion of those funds, just like we did, the $469,000. So I have heard several cities having trouble allocating those funds. However, because of this new guidance, at least on today's call, there was an indication that all of the cities in Rockwall County is taking this exact strategy.
Thank you.
And I think Alan has also, was it also Alan you indicated?
Richardson for sure. They have already done it. So I do know there's some other cities as well.
So to be very clear with the public, we're not talking about taking away funds from the programs we've already developed and rolled out to our citizens and to our businesses, but we are talking about a mechanism on reporting to Dallas County so that we preserve 100% of the CARES funds within the city coffers for use for appropriate CARES fund expenditures, whether that's reimbursement of costs, assistance to our individual families, assistance to our businesses, assistance to the food pantries, the robust grants, reimbursement for above and beyond usual costs as a result of managing the pandemic. Did I say that fairly, Ed and Brian?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
And I think, Blake, you have your hand up?
Yes. Sorry. When did you say we would come back and look at this? You said sometime around January, right? To look at the 1.2 million.
Yeah. So what we were saying, Blake, is that if there are any additional funds above and beyond what council's already committed, we would like to pause making decisions about those funds until we see if there's a second surge or additional cost we may not be expecting. And I will tell you one that may come. You know, there have been talk about a vaccine, and so Ed has been working with an extended group that if that vaccine becomes available to our community, then emergency personnel and our health authority, they have to figure out how they're going to get everybody vaccinated, and this is going to be a huge deal. There may be expenses even with that we don't even realize just yet. And I will tell you that Manal, you know, has talked about possibly using some of the CDBG funds for that. But my only point is that, you know, we may be dedicating, you know, our one of our fire stations for it, the RCC. There may be other expenses we don't even know about just yet until we know how that's going to, and we don't even know when yet. But when that does happen, you're going to be seeing thousands and thousands of people needing to get vaccinated, and there's got to be facilities to do that. So to your question, I was just trying to lay some groundwork as to why we would recommend not trying to rebudget those dollars today until we see how this dust is going to settle.
Yeah, I think that's a good plan. Another question regarding, and I don't know if this is appropriate to ask at this point, about the individual housing program and how we can better spread that information out. Is that something that we want to wait to talk about later, or Tammy?
Well, I don't know what Ed has on his future presentations, but you know, one of the things I wanted to highlight was, you know, this gives us time. So if we decide, you know, at the end of October 31st that we need to extend the individual assistance program, this gives us the flexibility to do that. Or if we decide, you know, to pause that for the month of November and maybe December and start it back up in January, you know, whatever the decision is, that gives us the flexibility. If we decide to roll out, you know, phase 4 of Robust Grant or phase 1 of a new type of business grant, it gives us that flexibility. So I think, you know, my recommendation would be to, you know, continue with the programs as we have them currently defined, get to the end of them, which is not in the too distant future, and then put this on a work session item for discussion, because I don't think discussing the programs in detail is on this agenda. Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah. Because I was going to ask about how we can better advertise the program. But yes, I agree with that.
Yeah. Does that make sense, Brian and Ed?
Mayor, that was the answer I was going to give. I will tell you, part of the strategy or part of the issue is how to get the word out. The other part of that is realizing that we're not going to be able to do it in the time frame that the Treasury has set for us to spend these dollars by.
Yeah, but using the allocations in this method, that extends our time period.
It does, Mayor. It does. It buys us time for our community to help our community.
Yeah. Martha, you have your hand up?
I do. So I just wanted to say that I support this strategy. I think it's a winner for our community. Anything that's going to help us reserve those funds or preserve them for our community and extend the amount of time that we can have to distribute those is just a good thing. And to your point, Brian, about vaccines and whenever that's available, I can't help but think that allocations for implementing that program will have to be funded outside of these funds that have already been allocated, because to your point, it's going to be a huge undertaking and expense. And I certainly do hope that they'll allocate additional funding to implement that program. But I'm excited about this. I think it's gonna give us the breathing room that we need to be able to do the right thing with these funds and also to preserve it for our community. So I fully support it.
I don't see any other hands up. I think with that, we'll move to the rest of your presentation, Ed, if that's okay, if we've answered your questions thus far.
So far.
Yes, Brian, I do have those items on the last slide for seeking consensus. Is that something we can do now, or just wait till
No,
the end?
finish your program. You only have a few more slides anyway. Let's go ahead and go through the rest of it first, if you don't mind.
If we can go to the next slide, please. We do have a second CRF allocation through the state for the, based on the population on the Rockwall County side. That allocation was $439,065. To date, we've submitted roughly $42,000 to the state for personnel costs related to my position, both budgeted and budgeted, and that's both the straight hours and overtime related to my work on COVID. Our strategy for the rest of the funding is to ask for both substantiated personnel costs totaling $399,000, and as a backup, as an automatic appeal to the state. Working through the state for FEMA reimbursements, they tend to challenge everything, especially their contractors. So we would like to submit an automatic appeal for that using budgeted fire operations personnel costs totaling $441,000. So that would essentially cover us 100% if they choose to challenge any of our original strategy requests.
And Ed, these are costs separate and apart from the other ones we just saw?
Yes, and so the plan is to submit primarily the $399,000 and other personnel costs, and as a backup to submit the fire operations payroll.
I'm sorry, I wasn't clear. Both of these categories are separate and apart from what the Dallas County costs we just saw?
Yes.
Okay.
Mayor, they all are part of the CARES Act money. And if you remember, we said that totaled about $3.7 million. This is just a portion that we got directly from the state, from the Rockwall County side of the population of Rowlett.
Yeah, I understand that. Thank you.
Are these costs then that we incurred within Rockwall County?
No, and those are costs that we can incur across the entire city. There was no restriction on where we incurred those costs.
Okay.
Next slide, please. As you recall, we also received a grant through the Office of the Governor for a little bit under $200,000. Today, we have not submitted any expenses. We are restricted on what we can submit based on an application and any subsequent amendments that are approved by the Office of the Governor. So our current strategy right now is to submit for a little bit over 96,000 decontamination equipment, and that allows us to decon any city facility or vehicle on our own. 61,000 in safety supplies. That includes hand sanitizer, masks, other protective equipment that if the city has purchased, and another $34,000 in police and fire unbudgeted expenses. Next slide, please. We do have other funding sources, including 2 CDBG allocations and a Medicaid reimbursement for transports from our EMS through the Department of Health. And we also have the potential unknown, which includes FEMA public assistance, which is the traditional route for disaster reimbursements, and any other future congressionally approved funding. Next slide. And that covers the current funding sources and their status. I'll take any questions on that.
So Ed, can we go back to see if Laura can find this? Can you go back to the slide that showed what we've already reported to Dallas County? It was pretty early in the presentation. You might have just had it.
I think we went too far back. There you go.
Right there. Yeah, okay. Thank you. So Ed, I don't know how to ask this. So are you going to submit? These two have already been submitted. So the remainder of the 3.2 million that you're going to submit is going to be based on the slide to the blue slide to the right, if we all concur. Is that right?
Yes, Mayor.
Okay. Okay. Regardless of our previous plan parameters.
Correct.
Okay.
That's our plan. We will continue, however, to track the expenses incurred from the robust program, individual household assistance program.
Right. Right. Okay. Thanks. I'm sorry. I just wanted to get that clear in my head. Okay, Laura, can you go back to the slide of, do we have consensus? Yeah. Go ahead, Ed.
Is there a consensus from council regarding any final changes to the funding parameters of the robust program? If we were to try to find a way to reduce the underrun in the program, one option would be to either increase the allocation availability for each business. Instead of 25,000, 35,000. We can increase the amount of months that are eligible for reimbursement. So when tracking the total amount eligible for a business, we were doing it in a 3-month basis. We can add additional months, or we can choose to not make any changes to the current robust program.
Can we get an update of where we are and the ones that we funded and what the need has been there? Because it didn't sound like the ask had been lower than what we had thought it was going to be, the average ask.
It was on a slide. We can pull that slide back up. I thought we weren't going to talk about changing program parameters in this meeting. You're saying now we can?
Mayor, if you get down to that third consensus statement, that is the provision to change our strategy to using the public safety personnel cost. And but if council did not want to do that, then we still needed to ask the first two questions, because then we would need to change our allocation strategy to help us figure out how we're going to spend the rest of the money, or as much of it as we can.
Okay, so
that's why each one has an or after it, because that's what we're trying to get to.
Okay, so really the first question is are we in concurrence with your new strategy? Do you see this, Matt? Is that what you're looking for?
Yeah, and I guess in phrased that way, I'm all for flexibility. Let's not try to shoehorn it in. I'm totally on board with this strategy. And if we want to look at the robust and redo that later, let's redo that later.
Let's pull the presentation down and so we can see all of council if we could. Thank you, Laura. All right, so I guess the question is, are we all comfortable with the new approach? Raise your hand, yes. That's 7-0. It's a great option, Ed. Thank you for all your hard work, you in finance. I know Tara's on here, Wendy's on here, Kim's on here. Great hard work y'all have put in on this.
Mayor, just one thing I want to say, and really, Ed, finance staff, basically this puts us in the driver's seat as we try to help our community. And granted, we're extremely fortunate that the Treasury changed the guidance. But I want to just say this, Ed made a comment earlier, and but the point I want to make with it is this. He made the statement that it took a while before we could catch on to what we were going to be doing, and I just want to say this: there were times where we didn't get additional guidance, like even with Dallas County, for a couple months after, or even longer. So my point is, this has been an evolving process all summer long, all the way going back even to, I think it was back to May, and so I think a lot of cities that don't take this strategy is going to have a hard time, and they're going to end up turning money back in. And as you said earlier, and I know Martha said it as well, we want to help our community. And if it takes a little time, to get the word out or get more people to apply, then let's use that time to do that and not be constrained by an accelerated time frame that the federal government has set for the CARES Act. So that's what I like about this. and Ed and Wendy and Tara and Kim, they really helped us figure out how to get in the driver's seat with it. So I really do appreciate that work.
Yeah, it sounds so easy today, and it has not been easy. And you guys have worked really hard to get to this point. What do you got consensus from council? So I think you've got all your questions answered. What do you think about the second meeting in November, putting on, the agenda, a review of the robust funding and a review of the individual assistance program, and see if where we want to move from there?
I think that's an excellent idea, Mayor.
Okay. You probably were going to do that anyway, but that timing seems about right.
Yeah.
And I know that one thing Martha has brought up, at least to me, and I think in a public meeting too, is we haven't been able to help our nonprofits with any of this because of the restrictions that Dallas County put on. So I want everybody to kind of think about, are there nonprofits that we should be assisting? If you look at FRAS, Friends of Rowlett Animals, they couldn't do their big fundraiser, and they're hurting for money. If you look at, I don't know who else, Friends of Rowlett Library, KRB, can't do their bingo because bingo has not been allowed, and that's their main fundraiser. So, I think we need to look at potentially opening up some of these funds that we're going to be able to carry over for assistance for nonprofit. Then we need to look at, are there other ways to help our businesses? We've had program parameters in the Robust Grant of, if you've lost income and, to reimburse salaries and to reimburse costs. But are there other ways that we should be helping our businesses? Do restaurants need money for outdoor heaters? Do restaurants need money for partitions? Are there specific items that we could put out there for assistance to the businesses that are hurting the most, that we could get the money to them quickly? There would be different program parameters than we've had to date with the Robust Grant. So I think that's the things we need to get our ears to the ground with our businesses, get in, economic development's ears and chamber's ears and Manol and her people, and, get our heads together and see if there's some other ways we should be helping our businesses with some of these funds.
Tammy, over the weekend, I spoke to one of our retail businesses that was just notified that they were disqualified for the grant. And the threshold, from what I understand, is that they had to prove up a 25% loss of income due to COVID. And they're a fairly new business, and they could only hit 22.5%. And it was just really heartbreaking because, they're looking at possibly having to close their doors, laying off employees. And so as we look at these issues, maybe lowering that threshold. I don't know if you do it across the board or case by case as you work with these businesses. But, I just I'm so glad that we have this opportunity to take a look at these folks that just came in under the wire and are thinking about having to close their doors. I hope that we can help them out.
Yeah, and I've said this to individuals too, is, I don't think we can take our current program and change the parameters, because there's businesses that didn't apply because they didn't meet the program parameters. I hate that business, I don't even know who it is, and I don't want you to say it publicly. I hate that business was on the cusp. But we would, in my opinion, we'd have to roll out a new program.
I agree.
All businesses have the opportunity to reapply.
Absolutely agree with that, Mayor. I wouldn't want to go back and try and change anything that we did. It was what it was, and but as we look at possibly doing round 4 or whatever we do, I just like to look at maybe lowering that threshold some so we can help out more businesses.
I think, Martha, what you'll find is what this flexibility gives us is if you do go to a round 4, you know, that adds another month of lost income and wages. So now they would qualify. And so there may be a whole new batch of businesses out there that do now qualify, you know, that could benefit of it. So it may not be that we need to restructure the parameters. It just may be that it's now gone on long enough that it's really starting to affect other groups as well. So, but good conversation to have in the future.
Yeah, that very well could be. You know, I just hope that they can hang on long enough to get all the applications and stuff done. But it is a great conversation to have, and I think maybe getting some feedback from those, you know, to analyze the ones that weren't able to qualify and just see what knocked them out, and maybe we try and help that out with another round.
So Whitney, you've been analyzing these along with the chamber, yes? You or Blake? Who's been doing that?
Well, I mean, we've been working with Michael and stuff. So what I wanted to say actually about this new approach is that it allows us the greatest amount of flexibility because we're not really under the same rules that we're currently under with Dallas County. So it allows us to be very unique and individual when we look at these the future rounds as we may have. So we could create a round just for nonprofits. We can create another round for businesses that's tailored to a specific division of businesses or a specific type, as Tammy alluded to, and Martha, you too, that, you know, a lot of businesses have had to make fixture type of improvements, leaseholder improvements to their property to accommodate for the rules around COVID. And when a business is already down because their sales are down, it's kind of like kicking them in the gut to have to go back and put up these plexiglass partitions and that sort of thing. So it'd be nice to be able to do a round to go back and maybe ask for some cost renegotiation with them to help them with that. So I guess the bottom line really is that we have the ability to do that now where we didn't before with this new approach. So that I think is a really fantastic piece that we can make some really nice custom programs that will really make a lot more or be more impactful than they has been in the past. So I think we can really do some good targeted approaches.
Okay. Thank you, Whitney. Appreciate that. Anything else, anybody? I think that's it then. You got what you need, Ed?
Yes, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you thank you to you and to the finance department and Brian, your staff, for everything you guys are doing. The year just keeps trudging along.
Here we go.
All right.
Well, good evening. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. We are adjourned.